Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Um, a couple of things by way of announcements before we get going here. One, just remember your response to last unit is due today. You can do a video or writing response, a written response if you want. If it's a written response, it doesn't have to be that long. A few sentences per prompt. Um, and if it's a video, I made it so you can make a 5-minute video, but you don't have to feel pressure to make it 5 minutes either. What I'm looking for is engagement that is thoughtful, and if you can show that, then don't stress out about it too much. Show that you've been working through the material and reading along and following along, but don't stress about it too much. Second thing is you guys are no help at all. Yesterday I had you fill out a form, which actually only about half of you did. So I don't know, maybe some of you are kind of waiting until the end of the week and doing all your schoolwork then or something like that. But 36 of you actually filled out the form. I was hoping for some input on what topic we would do next. We only have, well, now about 2.5 weeks left together, a little bit more than 2.5. But the two topics that we would normally be tackling in the end of the school year would be same-sex marriage or attraction, and then beauty, aesthetics, thinking about the way beauty relates to truth and how that works within Christianity, and usually focusing on music and films. So 36 of you responded, and 18 of you said you wanted to do same-sex marriage, and 18 of you said you wanted to do the aesthetics unit. So I'm going to try to do both. I'm going to try. I can't maybe be as interactive and maybe not going to be able to be as thorough with aesthetics anyway. In this format, we usually would watch film clips and that sort of thing, and listen to music, and that's not going to be as possible probably in this format, so that will be a little shorter, and then I'll just try to make this section a little bit shorter too. We're going to tackle same-sex attraction first, and I'll try to make it short enough that we have an opportunity for both. The last thing that we try to do usually every year is something called Letters from College, where we kind of hear advice for how to approach college from various people, teachers, sometimes former students. We'll see if we can maybe squeeze one or two of those in too. I'm sure there's people you would love to hear from on that. Today is going to be kind of introductory when it comes to same-sex marriage. But one of the things that we want to make sure we are doing, we want to make sure we're approaching this with the right context. This is the context of Christianity. In our context, we put Jesus at the center. That is, in a sense, countercultural. We live in a time and an age and a culture where putting yourself at the center is the ethic, right? Pursuit of happiness, you at the center, and as long as you're not harming anybody else, doing whatever it takes to bring about that happiness. But we put Jesus at the center. We believe that's where he rightfully belongs, and we believe that we are actually best. We're better off when he's at the center. When we live according to our natural design to be worshiping that which is worthy of worship, that's when we thrive. That's when there's human flourishing, right? Otherwise, we're kind of like a fish out of water, right? A fish thrives when a fish is living according to its design in the water. But when a fish says, I want to go climb trees, even if that fish thinks that's going to make them happy, that's not going to lead to their flourishing. So we have to think that way. What is our design? What's going to lead us to flourishing? What's the way we ought to live? And what we believe is that deferring to Jesus is that way. That might mean there are things about our instincts and our beliefs and our actions that need to actually be formed, moved into alignment with Jesus. We've talked about how Christianity means obeying the teachings of Jesus, taking on the posture of Jesus towards others. And we've talked about how that means mirroring the actions of Jesus. So that has implications in all kinds of scenarios, and we have to imagine that might have implications when it comes to sexual ethics as well. But one of the major implications of it is how we think of each other in love. You can't say that you're taking on the posture of Jesus towards others when you are derisive and dismissive of other people. You can't say that you're mirroring the actions of Jesus if you are hateful towards an entire group of people. You can't say that you're obeying the teachings of Jesus if you're acting without love. Love is at the center of his teachings. And Paul picks up on that. Right? We're a clanging cymbal if we do anything without love. Speaking truth without love is a clanging cymbal. So that's one of the things I want to characterize our conversation here. You may have really strong opinions, and in both directions, those opinions have to be painted and immersed in love. If you are what you might consider more progressive when it comes to approaches and opinions regarding same-sex attraction in marriage, you can't be dismissive and angry towards the more conservative people and also be acting in the manner of Jesus. And if you have more conservative views, or maybe we would say traditional views regarding same-sex marriage and attraction, and you are dismissive and hateful of people who are more progressive or actually experience same-sex attraction, then you are, simply put, not acting in the manner of Jesus. And if we're going to put Jesus at the center, it's going to include love. Now, that being said, it will require discipline for us. It's maybe going to be against some of our more natural inclinations and even our sort of passionate and first reactions to topics like this. We're going to have to be disciplined. What's interesting about this topic in that regard is that it's actually a pretty new conversation. You don't find this debate in the church if you go back 100 years. Going back 100 years, there's no real debate. Now, there certainly were same-sex attracted Christians 100 years ago, and there were certainly people who were living a lifestyle in that regard 100 years ago who claimed to be Christian and were Christians, but you don't see it as a debate about what is right, or you don't see it as a debate regarding church leadership. It just wasn't a question. The question itself has been fairly recent then, like decades actually. And that makes it interesting because we have an ancient faith and a faith that actually celebrates its ancient tenor, character. We want to be an apostolic faith, meaning we want to be able to trace our beliefs back through the apostles to Jesus himself, right? So that is a tension. How do we ask a question that might, in a sense, be new if we're going to have an apostolic and ancient faith? And that actually is more complicated, given that the Bible may say less than you would expect about it. There's less direct treatment of same-sex attraction or sexuality in the Bible than you would expect. Essentially 6 passages, 6 verses that you could say are directly about, or at least directly refer to same-sex attraction and actions. And so we have maybe a little less to go on when it comes to direct. So we're going to have to start to think like, okay, what's the context of Scripture? How does it all fit together in the story of Scripture? What's the foundation of human sexuality here? And when we do that, we're going to see that there's a spectrum of thought. The spectrum of thought includes what we might think of as the more traditional approach. I would say, same-sex actions. Some people would be conservative enough to say even attraction is outside of God's design. And on the end of the spectrum is that actually God's design can include same-sex marriage. Some people call that the revisionist viewpoint. I think that's a little loaded. If you call it revisionist, you're basically saying they're departing from the the viewpoint that is actually biblical. So I think maybe we could say progressive, but you have this spectrum, and there's lots actually in between. On the one side, where you say this traditional sense of only heterosexual marriage is acceptable and attraction is acceptable, and the other side, that God can work in and through actually same-sex marriages. We have this spectrum. We're gonna see both sides of the spectrum, and we're gonna try to kind of look at Scripture to do it. I'm going to start with the more traditional viewpoint, and a scholar named Richard Hayes, who for a long time was the president of Duke Divinity School. He's a remarkable scholar, and I'm going to be posting a chapter that I would like you to read, where I think he does a good job of modeling for us what it would look like to be faithful to his viewpoints, be faithful to Jesus, be faithful to also loving his neighbor very, very well. You possibly may end up disagreeing with him, and we'll see the other side of the coin next, where we'll be talking about the more progressive viewpoint. But we're going to start with Richard Hayes. We're going to start with the more conservative viewpoint, and try to work through the scriptures one at a time. We'll start working through them actually tomorrow, looking at some passages in the Old Testament, and then on Thursday we'll look at passages in the New Testament, and Friday we'll kind of wrap up what is the traditional viewpoint, and then next week we'll flip it over. So it would be good if you could start that reading, but imagine if you've got other stuff going on, you can wait till tomorrow to start the reading, and make sure you're getting your response in today, and let me know if you have any trouble. I'm hoping that I did Flipgrid right. If I didn't, I'm so sorry. If you want to do a written assignment, you can upload it through assignments. Just let me know if you need anything. Have a great Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow.